We are about to enter a season of chaos. So let's talk about what's coming next and how we can most effectively navigate this situation. Hi, I'm Saratoga Ocean, and I work together with an interdimensional, interuniversal, and extraterrestrial force known as Telstar, along with Archangel Michael. My goal is to help you navigate the events on this planet so that you can most effectively stay on your path of ascension and evolution. Now, what's been happening for the past 4 years is that the controllers of this planet are finally coming out of hiding. Now, since probably around the Industrial Revolution, these controllers were working in smaller, more unseen ways, which have then grown into bigger and bigger, more obvious ways over time. So basically, they've been taking, roughly 100 years or so to build the infrastructure for their final takeover, which is where they are today. Now, I think that their true coming out happened at the very end of the 20th century in 1999, when they started this mass hysteria about Y2K. That, I think, might have been the first time that they really introduced a global reign of terror, because they had the whole planet completely terrified that some glitch was going to happen in all the computers. At the moment the clock turned to midnight or past midnight on the year 2000, January 1, 2000, and that the entirety of civilization was going to completely fall apart. Now, some of you may remember that time, and others of you may not. But I remember it well, because we were in the DC area at the time, and I remember all the communities across the country were preparing for this civilizational breakdown, and the stories were absolutely terrifying of what was maybe going to happen. And I remember going to, my husband and I went to a lecture at the Washington National Cathedral. This is the weirdest place. Think of how weird this is, you guys. The Washington National Cathedral had I think it was an all-day workshop. I barely remember it. But the main speaker, the keynote speaker, was John Koskinen, who was, I think it was President Clinton's cabinet somewhere. Anyway, he was the main speaker. I will never forget what that was like. This guy painted the most terrifying picture of the planet as a result of Y2K. It was absolutely frightening, like the worst horror movie you could imagine. Every single thing was going to break down. And it was weird because I remember thinking at the time, foolishly, I will admit, well, I mean, this guy's an authority. I mean, he's in, high up in the government. He wouldn't be saying these things if it wasn't possibly true. Yes, I'm embarrassed to admit that, but that's what I thought at the time. Anyway, the whole world was being terrified about this possible incident, which now I think was ridiculous. I really think that was when they lit the fuse on their coming reign of terror, which is what we are in the middle of right now. You know how if you light the fuse on a stick of dynamite and that little spark goes and goes and goes, and we're getting closer and closer and closer to the big kablooey or something. I don't know, but yeah, it's fascinating to me that that's when it started, 1999. Right after that, in the year 2000, immediately after that, that's when all this stuff came out about AI and the dangers of AI and where we could be headed. And I've told you guys a story about things that I learned from some scientists and things about the new emerging life form on planet Earth, this silicon-based life form, artificial life. I've told you all that story. I'm not going to go into it again here today. I think I've told it several times in past videos. But yeah, that was the year 2000, all of a sudden. And people were warning. I think Wired Magazine had a major article out that year, the future doesn't need us. And everything changed. At that turnover, from 1999 to 2000, everything changed. That was the turning point. That was a major turning point. And then, of course, after that, not long after, a year or so after, we had 9/11. And that was a massive, massive trauma, certainly for the U.S., and that set off a series of wars and all kinds of things after that. See, I'm trying to give you guys a little bit of a historical perspective on where we've been so that we can really get context and greater understanding for where we are so that we don't lose our way. Now, I personally think that 9/11 was the start of some massive trauma-based mind control on a massive scale. Because it was literally right after that. I mean, that was where they really amped up their reign of terror. There was so much fear being spread about not just terrorism, but also all the ways that it could happen, poison gas coming out of airplanes and all this other stuff. And I probably shouldn't say all of it, but yeah, we were completely terrorized by all of the stuff that could potentially happen. But here's what I mean by the mind control afterwards. It was right after 9/11 when all of a sudden all this stuff started happening culturally. Like, oh, we shouldn't have Christmas. And I remember that Christmas was the Christmas they wanted to get rid of Santa Claus. They said, we cannot have Santa Claus. Santa Claus is offensive. I mean, this is like out of the blue, right? Nobody cared about Santa Claus before then. And all of a sudden, it was a huge deal. So that's when they started to pick apart things that had been cultural norms. And I would say that that process probably went on for the next 20 years until about 2020. That was more like if you want to weaken a structure, you just keep chipping away at it and chipping away at it. And eventually the foundation starts to crack a little bit and the structure is much easier to topple. So I think that's what was going on from the year 2000 until the year 2020. They were just chipping away, ongoing wars, ongoing threats, terrifying scenarios, all this stuff, just trying to break us down socially and culturally. And the other thing I was thinking about too is prior to the year 2000, every decade was kind of celebrated. There was, the 60s and the 70s and the 80s and the 90s. It probably was going on for like 100 years where every decade was, there was something to get excited about, something to be thankful for, culturally speaking. All of that went away after 2000. We don't do that anymore, do we? We don't talk about decades or things that were achieved or accomplished or whatever because they're just taking it all down. But I always found that curious how that ceased to exist once we crossed over into the year 2000. So currently we are in decade number 3. So from 2000 to 2020, they were chipping away, chipping away, chipping away. And then we had the big event, right? The big pandemic event. And that, my friends, was the most unbelievable trauma on a massive scale, on a planetary scale. Everyone on Earth lived through that traumatic event. And one of the things that I've noticed every time these controllers unleash yet another collective trauma on us, these traumatic events are always followed by a very focused degree of mind control. They're always followed by some way to change the way we think, change the way we look at things in ways that are not even related to the traumatic event. And there's so much symbolism involved in this stuff, right? Like, okay, so we had I'll call it that health issue. And during that health issue, that traumatic health issue, everyone was told to cover their face, stay 6 feet apart. In other words, all of our human connections were being broken. Everything that mattered about us was being dissolved. And when that was over, what was that followed up with? Well, interestingly enough, it was followed up with this. You know that thing we used to call a woman? Well, we were wrong about that, because the truth is we don't know what a woman is. We have no idea what a woman is. And I think you guys know what that has led to, because what that has led to, without my going into detail, which I probably shouldn't, what that has led to is basically opening the door to transhumanism. And of course, ChatGPT came in right at the perfect moment, so inviting us all to share our minds with AI, inviting us all to hand over our creativity to AI. And all of a sudden, AI gets unleashed globally into the entire civilization on planet Earth, into the entire human civilization. Right after the trauma of that health issue unfolded, and we come out of that, collectively speaking, totally confused, totally disarmed, totally off balance, right? And then we're told, oh, you know something? What you thought was a human being actually wasn't a human being. Your notion of a human being and things like reproduction and stuff like that just never really existed. That was all wrong. So you can just forget about that. So basically, from the year 2000 until 2020, they were basically chipping away at our civilization in an attempt to weaken us and weaken us culturally. And then that got ramped up in a big way with that health issue at the beginning of 2020. And now they've amped it up to a completely different level where there's so much change happening so quickly that it's very easy for us to get lost in terms of who we are and why we're here. Now, currently, the controllers are massively targeting the US, probably because this country's had a pretty large influence worldwide. And I'm sure they want to eliminate that altogether, because their idea is, you know, the WEFers want to have the strongest, most powerful influence on our entire civilization. Now, I've also been thinking about the fact that, as I shared with you guys, I think in the last couple of videos, I think that the controllers were clearly trying to remove both of the candidates for president of the US. This year, I mean, a lot of energy's gone into removing them, right? Well, hey, how about what they just did? They actually just tried to kill one of them, and the other one they forced out. So that's so bizarre. And I was thinking about how much hatred there is and negativity and fear and all of this. Like, an election is not at all about what it used to be about. It's certainly not civilized. But there's so much hate and fear. And I was asking myself, when did this start? Because I don't remember it always being this way. And here's what I remembered, you guys. Remember when I was talking about 9/11 and how that was like a massive collective trauma, certainly in the US? And that's when this hatred started, because we were living in Santa Fe, New Mexico, not long after that. And this weird thing started to develop there that I'd never seen before. And this was, I think it was President Bush, right? I'm not even going to get into whether you like or hate any of these politicians, because it's completely beside the point. It has nothing to do with my larger point. So I'm not even going to get into that. But what was really weird is this little custom developed, and it went on for several years, where every Friday, people would line up on one of the main roads in Santa Fe, and they would have all of this hatred towards the president. I mean, massive hatred. they would have Black American flags and all these horrible signs, and they would be yelling, and it was weird. And I actually nicknamed it the Tunnel of Hate, because when you drove through it, you felt like, when you drove by them, because they were on both sides, you felt like you were driving through a tunnel of hate. And that's when I think it started. That's when it started, this tradition. We now have a tradition that whoever's either president or running for president is a dictator and is Hitler, right? I mean, that's just par for the course. Everybody's Hitler now. Well, it started back then. It started after 9/11. And I just think it's so interesting to watch how these trends evolve and develop and how they weave this stuff throughout our lives. And we don't even see it happening. We don't even notice it, but yet we're being manipulated the entire time, right? So anyway, this whole idea of hatred built and built and built. And now, of course, so then I asked myself, what was the point of all this hate? Well, it makes sense, right? Because if you're going to eliminate, if they're going to show us that they can get rid of both candidates if they want to, if they've built up enough hatred in advance of that, it's maybe not going to bother people all that much. So where we are right now is we are in the fog of war. We are in a fog, and it's almost impossible to predict what is coming next. But if you look at the intentions of these controllers, if you put all of it together, and I think we all know most of it, you can see that this is going into a definite period of chaos. I think we're already in it. We just don't even fully realize it at this point. Now, if you think for a moment, let's say they had succeeded in killing the one candidate. I think they thought they were going to succeed, and what was that going to do? Well, that was going to create massive chaos, massive destruction. I mean, who knows what was going to come out of that, right? Something really bad was going to come out of that. So it almost feels like we're hanging together by a thread right now. And we're being hit on all sides, really all around the world in different ways, depending on where you are. So now I want to offer you a perspective that I think is very, very important for all of us who really care about our journey as human creators, our journey of evolution in the cosmos, and our entire ascension process. I think we need to look at this in a deeper, broader way. And let me start by addressing the fact that so many people who feel like they're light workers or feel like they're just genuinely good people, and I'm sure are, have this feeling of, I don't ever want to come back here again. I don't know why I'm here. I don't want to be here. This place is horrible. I'm never coming back again. All of those feelings are 100% understandable. Totally understandable. Like, you could say, well, why would I even want to be here at all? What happened? It must have been a mistake that I ended up here, or something bad sent me here and I need to escape. I mean, there's all kinds of ways to look at this. The problem is, if that's the only way we see it, it does not give us any sort of a viable path forward into a much, much better experience of life and existence in the universe. There's no path. There's no path forward to say, I'm never coming here again. Well, what does that even mean? What kind of statement is that? Where do you go from there? Are you just assuming that someone else is going to solve this for you? That's probably a bit of a gamble. Now, I know it's a very common sentiment to feel like, well, you know, collectively, we're not really responsible for this mess because as a collective human civilization, we've been manipulated, we've been lied to, we've been controlled. So we're not really responsible because it's not our fault. It is that position that also positions us to believe that because this situation was not our fault, therefore someone should come and rescue us. And because, like, if we're not responsible for where we are, then we also shouldn't be responsible for getting out of here. You see how those two things tie together? And I think this is one of our great weaknesses as a collective humanity. We don't want to be responsible for a whole lot of anything. And I'm speaking collectively now. We want there to always be someone in authority, which there has been on this planet. They have controlled us, manipulated us, lied to us. Now we find out, oh, they did all that for nefarious reasons. Oh, this is really bad. So how about if we get someone else in authority from out there in the galaxy or some higher realm or whatever? How about if we just get a better authority to come and get us out of this authoritative structure and put us in another one? Because if you believe that someone needs to come and fix this, you haven't actually changed the position that got us into this mess in the first place. So essentially, it's a mindset problem. The mindset or belief is someone else did this to us. Therefore, the equivalency would be someone else also needs to fix this for us. There's no way out with that mindset. So let's try a little experiment. Let's take that mindset and just set it aside. You can always pick it up later if you like it and you want it back. But let's just set it aside momentarily. Let's behave like we are truly cosmic adults that do not feel that being on a planet in space is a foreign experience. Like it's something that we're used to. We happen to be on this planet. There are gazillions of other planets, but this is the one we're on right now. So let's think like what I like to call cosmic adults. And let's say to ourselves, okay, so what has clearly these controllers would have never pulled any of this off without the collective of humanity. So with that awareness, with that simple awareness, what role did the collective of humanity play into this picture? What role did we play as a collective to make all of this possible for these controllers to come in and take over? And I'm just going to refer to this in recent history, like the past 100 years or so. I think one of the biggest reasons that we have collectively fallen into this trap of making it possible for these controllers to take over our planet and bring us to where they want to bring us now is because we have been such chronic people pleasers. We always want to do the right thing. We never want to offend anyone. We want to get socially accepted for following the plan, you know, what our life's plan is supposed to be according to these controllers. We want to get rewarded for having successfully lived through the cookie cutter lifestyle that they set out for us. And here's what that looks like. It's really, really very simple. You're born, you go to school for a whole bunch of years, probably till you're maybe they're extending school so much. It's almost from birth, right? Daycare. Until you're maybe 25, maybe it's going to be as bad as a quarter of a century. You have to be in school. School is where you get trained for compliance and obedience. School is where you're told, when you leave school, you go off and you find your career or your job. So you get your job, you get your career, then you're supposed to reproduce, have more kids, because the system needs more workers. And they go through the same process, and then you retire and you die. So the more capable you are of going through that cookie cutter system, that factory style way of life, that's all pre-designed, you're born, you're put into that factory conveyor belt. And the more that you can comply with that and obey those agendas and do what you're told, you're going to get applause, you're going to get approval, you might get some trophies, people will say you're great. Yet how many people have been doing this for many, many years, decades. How many people get to maybe halfway through that and then realize, wait a second, this is not all that it's cracked up to be. This is not fulfilling. This is not great. But yet they just continue on nonetheless because they don't know what else to do. Now, the controllers needed for all of us to live in this compliant cookie cutter lifestyle because they needed the populace of the planet to function as workers to build the infrastructure that would lead to where we are today and where they want to take us next. They couldn't afford to have a bunch of creative people living creatively, evolving, expanding their consciousness, becoming more and more intelligent. They just could not afford that. Doesn't that make sense? So, by willingly complying with this lifestyle, in whatever form it takes, depending on what part of the world you're in, all we've ever done as a collective humanity is comply with these controllers. That's all we've ever done collectively. And now we look at them and we're just aghast, like we're so betrayed. But we were betrayed from the day we were born, that we were told to obey and comply with this agenda. Now, of course, we cannot fault children for being in the situation they're in because they don't have the power of independence and sovereignty yet. But once we reach adulthood, that's the time to start asking questions. Maybe even throughout childhood at some point, who knows? I mean, children are a lot more intelligent than we give them credit for, right? But at some point, it would have been nice if we could have realized, you know what? The reason this is a bad deal is because it requires us to turn against our hearts. It requires us to be uncreative. It requires us to always be looking outside of ourselves for approval. It requires us to live in fear of rejection. It requires us to live in all of these ways that are in no way aligned with who we really are. So by never questioning it, by going along with it, the collective of humanity has become a co-conspirator, an unwitting, unconscious co-conspirator in this entire mess. So by socially complying with all of this is where humanity played right into the controller's hands. And now people are at a loss, like, oh my goodness, we've been betrayed. What do we do now? So let's talk about what we can do now as cosmic creators. The number one thing to realize, this is so important, you guys, this is so vitally imperative to understand. It is really, really hard to live on planet Earth if you're not going to live as a creator. It's really, really hard. It's hard, particularly now, when these controllers are dismantling the entire structure that they told us we needed to buy into. When they are dismantling the entire structure that they told us we needed to devote our entire lives to. And now they're pulling the rug out from under everyone. So I like to think of this as being akin to a collective life review. You know how you probably heard about having a life review. Once you leave the planet, you review your time here and come to terms with whatever you did or didn't do or whatever. Now, I advise giving yourself a life review multiple times while you're alive. Like, don't wait until you're gone to have your life's review. It's better to do it while you're here. So in the case of ourselves as a collective humanity, we can look at ourselves and say, okay, let's do a collective life review of humanity here on planet Earth. And then that's the beginning of taking responsibility, because we have to take responsibility, you guys. We cannot sit around and hope for the best, think somebody's going to save us, think if this guy gets elected, it'll all be fine, think if some spaceship comes down, everything will be good again. We cannot afford this position anymore. This position of always thinking there's someone else that's going to fix this is the very reason we are so vulnerable. This position of thinking that some outside authority is going to tell us who we are, what we're supposed to do, think, feel, etc. This is why we're so incredibly vulnerable. The only way to heal our vulnerability as a humanity is to start by giving ourselves a life review. I mean, isn't that the essence of evolving as an individual? Reviewing your life and asking yourself, what have I done? Now, obviously, we're not going to get everybody on earth to suddenly do this. That's not my point. But each one of us who's here is part of that collective. So it starts with individuals waking up to the bigger picture and saying, okay, hold on. This isn't working. This is never going to work. This utter lack of responsibility for what is happening on planet Earth, this tendency to blame the controllers, blame this, blame that, expect someone else to save us. This isn't working. To just pause and admit that it doesn't work. And say, okay, let's review. Now, I just laid out for you here in this video, I laid out for you sort of the big picture, very general, of course, not at all comprehensive worldwide, but enough to give you the idea. So you could think of it as sort of like a little mini collective life review. Just a little one, just a little piece of it. And within that, we can look at ourselves and say, okay, I was a part of that. I am a part of that. And then we can start with ourselves, because what is the collective comprised of? It's comprised of individual human beings. So we can start with ourselves and say, okay, what role have I played in my life? What role of compliance and believing in false things that I knew in my heart were not true? I knew in my heart it went against myself. I repressed myself. I suffocated my self-expression. I lived in fear of rejection, socially or otherwise. What role did I play in this collective that was a part of this situation? The moment you seek to do that, you have stepped away from contributing to the problem. Because see, the truth is we are creators by nature. We all have our own individual minds, and we have our collective consciousness. So if we're contributing to a collective consciousness that says we're all victims, we've all been screwed over by these controllers and everything's terrible and it's not our fault, we're dead in the water. Where do you go from there? So instead, let me put it this way. There's so much talk in the spiritual community about ascension and going to these higher realms and going to 5D and all of this, right? What is the practical meaning of that? What is the practical meaning of living in the universe? Not just the galaxy, not just our little section of the universe, but living in the cosmos at large. What is the practical reality of that? Doesn't it make sense that that involves a massive shift in one's mindset? Doesn't it make sense that the first thing we need to let go of is this addiction to thinking planet Earth is everything and all there ever is and all there ever was and all there ever will be? Doesn't it make sense to just release ourselves from the addiction of thinking the way we always thought before? We cannot afford to live in fear of the planet that we are on. We cannot afford to be in total rejection of whatever part of the universe we are standing on. Because, like I said before, where do you go from there? There's no place to go. The only thing you can do there is just wait to see what happens next. So I want to offer you guys a little process if you want to try this. We can each conduct our own private life review in the context of everything I shared with you today. In the context of what the controllers have been unfolding for the last 24 years and earlier than that. And how do you know what role you may have played in their ability to pull this off? Well, here's how you know. It's really simple. And this is not about blame and accusation and feeling bad about yourself and saying, oh, I'm a failure. I didn't do things the way I should have, because that's just more of the same. No, it's just stepping back and saying, okay, I'm done with this insanity. I'm done with this lack of responsibility. I'm just done with being a victim of these stupid controllers. I am no longer going to lend my mind and my consciousness to their agenda. So what you do is you step back, you review your life, and then you can ask yourself, where was there a turning point, a possible turning point in my life that I felt intuitively and in my heart I could have gone in that direction, but I didn't do it because I couldn't see it, or I was afraid, or I was just too busy focused on the path I was on, which was one of compliance and obedience in some form or another? What choices did I make in my life to turn against myself, to judge myself, to betray my heart, to not even want to actually know myself because I was too busy repressing myself so I would look good to other people? Where did I do those things in my life? That's the kind of life review you can do in the context of what I've been sharing with you. Because wherever we turn against our hearts, wherever we turn against our true nature, our true human selves, turn against ourselves as a creator, we become a part of what is wrong on this planet. We have sacrificed our strength, sacrificed our power, to get kudos from other people who are doing the same thing. Now, when you do that while you're still alive, that's a great moment. And here's why. Because it demonstrates a recognition that you don't really die. You actually go on. You actually are on a cosmic journey. It demonstrates your awakening at a higher level. And I want to say something else about this notion that we should all just magically end up in 5D or 6D or whatever. Why? Why should we end up there? Ask yourself that question. Why? Based on what? Based on some, I don't know. Here's the thing, you guys. There are people in these higher realms that live as creators. Very high vibrational creators that are not confused, not compliant, not obedient slaves, and not victims. Do you really think that if we maintain our current state of consciousness, we can just be there with them? Really? No, there are laws and principles in this universe that are laws of frequency and vibration. You can't even exist at those higher realms when your consciousness is at the level of a victim, a compliant, obedient individual, somebody who just wants to make everybody else like them. You can't even exist there. You're not just going to go there by magic. We must evolve into those higher realms. And the beautiful thing is we can start immediately. This is the problem with waiting around to be saved, you guys. The whole time people are waiting around to be saved, they're not evolving. They're standing still. They're doing nothing. They're going through their daily routines, which they all learned in being compliant, obedient slaves. And they're not creating anything. They're not evolving themselves back into being a creator. So they're going nowhere fast. They're just standing still, waiting. Let's see what happens next. Let's see if we get saved. Let's see if there's a solar flash and we all get beamed up to some higher dimension. Do you really think that's how the universe works? Guys, that's like a cartoon. That's not even real. There's nowhere to go from here that's going to be any easier for you to do this than it is right now. Because this is where we are right now. This is the place from which we start. So we need to get rid of all this fiction that, well, we'll end up in a better place. And when we get to that better place, then we'll evolve. Then we'll go forward. It doesn't work like that. Wherever you are in the present moment of now, in the universe, that is your starting point for the moment. This is the point from which we go forward. There is literally nothing to wait for. So in real simple terms, on a practical level, offer yourself the gift of a life review in the context of what I'm talking about. Because it's this compliant, obedient victimization that is the basis for the collective consciousness of humanity that has us locked into these controllers' agenda. The only way that changes is one person at a time. And you don't have to worry about what if other people don't do this, Saratoga? Aren't we trapped? No, you're never trapped. You are never, ever trapped. You are a creator. You can create whenever you choose to learn. I'll say relearn how to do so, because when you're in a lifetime of the habit of compliance and obedience and fear and victimhood, you don't remember anything about being a creator. You completely forgot. So now is the time to restart your process of evolution and not get trapped in this crazy scenario that these controllers are unfolding for the planet. So let's just look at just to wind this up, just a couple of simple things. Stop betraying yourself. Stop belittling yourself and judging yourself. Stop looking to other people to tell you if you have value or not. Start there. Then do your own life's review. Where have I turned against myself? Where did I shun opportunities because I was afraid I wouldn't be liked, or I was a failure, or whatever it was? Just come to terms with that so that you can make a different decision going forward. And what does it mean to be a creator? Well, it's really the process of learning to be a creator is very simple. Practice the art of setting an intention, always, of course, to improve your experience of being alive. See if you can follow through on that intention and make it happen. That's a really, really simple way to look at it, but it's a start. It's a frame of reference, and we need a new frame of reference. Wherever you can improve your experience of being alive, you are creating something new, positive, and at a higher level of consciousness. So whatever that is, wherever you can start, whatever small way you can do that, go forward and do it, because this is who we are. We are creators, and we need to come back into that state of being, that state of mind, and that state of consciousness. So the more of us that take back our minds, our hearts, our physical embodiment, and truly own ourselves 100%, own it, restore it, set our evolution in process again, that is a whole big chunk of energy that these controllers will no longer have access to. So think about what a service that is to the collective of humanity as you're going through your very own process. Now, before I go, I want to let you guys know that in October, I will be reopening the doors to my private Cosmic Journey membership. This is such a wonderful group of people. We have, I have in this membership the 5 stages of the Ascension Path to keep you focused on your journey. We have loads of content, podcasts, videos, PDFs, things I never share anywhere else. I don't talk about current events there. We are focused strictly on our evolutionary process. We have a monthly live Q&A, which is one of my favorite things about this membership. And if this is something you think you might be interested in, I have a wait list. I only open the doors twice a year. So if you think you want to check it out, just get on the wait list, and then you will be notified in October when I do open the doors. And I will put a link to the waitlist down below. You can just go get on the waitlist, and then you will be notified as we get closer, and I'll be sending you more information. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you found value in everything I shared with you here. And if so, please give it a thumbs up and share it out with anyone else who you think would really like to have a fresh perspective on this situation that we all share here on planet Earth. And be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because I am here on Tuesdays with all new videos. And with that, I'm sending you so much love, light, and high vibrational energy. Have a beautiful day, my friends. Namaste.